WBO here. This is Jimmy Miller of the Utah Magazine, and my name is Spud Spornitz. I'm the publishing editor of the Dragonfly newsletter.
We want to thank this weekend. Expecting a good turnout, and his folks have really made the place look pretty, nice and clean, smoothed out all the bumps everywhere, like a golf course. And we're expecting to have a great time and a lot of learning, a lot of flying going on.
Chuck, again, we really appreciate you having us here.
We enjoy having you folks in, and we look forward to each year.
We have a lot of fun. This is our 4th year, yes.
And we hope to have another great year next year, or many more.
It'll be even bigger and better.
100 years into the future. Thank you.
Before we get going, one of the things that I want to remember to bring up is that the EAA has just announced this new program where they're looking for folks who have experience in various home-built airplanes to function as, I forget the name they call that. Does anybody remember that? It's like their technical advisors that they have for each chapter, where they're looking for guys to be advisors to folks who are going to be flying these airplanes. And I'd like to encourage you pilots of Dragonflies and Quickies and Q2s to participate in that program. Because, I mean, that's essentially what we're doing here, is we're getting pilots together with builders so that the builders who will soon be pilots will hear the inside dirt on how to fly these things. And it'd be nice if we had guys out in the chapters who have volunteered to help new pilots for Quickies and Q2s. So, I think that was in the last EAA magazine, the last one or two. The first thing I'd like to do is go through and have everybody who's here involved with Quickie introduce themselves and let us know where you are in your project, so we got an idea of who's here. We always do this. And
Who are you?
who am I? Where's my name tag? I don't even have my hat. Does anybody know who I am? No. Oh. Oh, yeah. Sweet Potato Masal. I'm Spud's alter ego. Yeah, I'm Jim Masal, and I am one of the founders of the Quickie Builders Association, which has been in operation for 14 years, I guess. We've got an enormous amount of newsletters, and I'm starting to dry up. And been going to, I was thinking when I was at Oshkosh this year, I've been going to Oshkosh for 22 years straight. I remember when you could actually go out there and watch airplanes fly. And now all you can do is go out there and watch airport stuff fly around. And our airplanes sit on the ground. Start with you. Where are you? I mean, you're down the road so close you can bring your airplane here on a trailer.
Yeah. I'm Al Medley. I live in Tulsa. I've been working on a IQ 200 for something close to 10 years. It's been about 80% finished for the past 7 years. I work on it now and then when it's finished.
Al, are you doing anything new and innovative or anything you're looking forward to testing that other people haven't tried yet?
Well, I've done some things which may or may not be wise. Years ago, when Shaheen was still attending Oshkosh, the last time he brought his airplane up there and he was racing and telling us about his high performance, he cut his cooling air intakes down to very small holes and reduced his carburetor intake and had used an inductor on his exhaust system. And I took measurements and notes and went home and tried to emulate that system. I remember him saying this was excellent, it was great. You got cooling when the engine was cranked up in the air. You didn't get the cooling when it was cut back, then you didn't have the shop cooling when you landed and all these sorts of things. So I'm trying it, but whether or not it will be successful, time will tell.
Okay. Yeah, that's something I don't normally do, but I know there's guys out there that have neat ideas they're trying, and I think we ought to stop and just at least get an idea of who's out there doing trick stuff. And you brought up an interesting name there, Gene Sheehan. Gene Sheehan was the guy who, one of, I guess, three. It was Sheehan, Tom Jewett, and Bert Rutan that got together. Rutan essentially designed the Quickie airframe. Sheehan was the engine guy for the Quickie. And then there was a Canadian who wanted to make a bigger Quickie. So he started working on a two-place Quickie, which became the Q2. And my understanding is that Rutan was not involved at all in that engineering feat. Yeah. And in fact, there was some words about that between them and Quickie aircraft. But anyway, then the original Q2, which was a slab-sided job, like the Quickie, crashed, and then they developed this fuselage shape that we have now. So, but while that being Gene Sheehan came up, do you have a spotting report? Is he alive and well? Brian? This is Brian Martinez, my arch enemy from California.
My name is Brian Martinez. I live in Quartz Hill, which is outside of Lancaster, Palmdale. My airplane's up at Mojave. It hasn't flown yet. I'm occasionally up at Mojave and snooping around. So Sheehan's up there. His airplane's still in existence. His hangar is still in existence. He's been dabbling in a whole lot of different projects. Really kind of a stealthy guy. You get behind him in the car, you try to wave him down, and he kind of runs. But you know, on occasion, I've met up with him, and he did come around and look at my airplane and see the project the progress that I've made, and make some advise me on some things to do. About the only thing that he's done recently is he's changed the arrangement of the tail wheel. He's gone to the toss type tail wheel, and he actually machined out the hub himself. And there's one other guy on the field who has an airplane that hasn't flown. And that's pretty much where Gene is. The original airplane that he did all the racing in is kind of trashed out on the inside right now. I think he had to go redo the panel. But I think he was saying like he was planning to do some testing on the airplane later on this year. But he's still around.
Okay. One of the reasons I'm interested in that is I may be passing the guy's name to you. There's a guy called me from Florida who is interested in getting a hold of the rights to that airplane. Now, I'm assuming Gene still has it. I know that he went bankrupt, and I'm thinking that those rights maybe got auctioned. I don't know. But he's probably the only guy who knew when the auction was going to take place. And if it was me, I'd try to get those rights back. But every once in a while we have this. Somebody out there, in fact, has fuselage molds for the airplane. Who does?
Joe Strummer.
Joe Strummer. And they periodically have some fantastic designs for getting this thing back into production, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Joe is trying to sell it. Well, you know, the bottom line on it is, I would skip that whole avenue going toward Sheehan altogether. If somebody wants to go get this thing, a new Q200 line going, what you ought to do is go call it something else, make some minor changes on it, and basically go with a, just call it a flat list, whatever you want to do. And maybe the dimensions on the thing are just less than 1% different, but it's still a different airplane, still a different design, and we go.
Well, I think the tailwind is done that way. I mean, there's several, I forget what it was originally, but there are several different airplanes that look like tailwinds. Cougar, yeah, it was a Cougar to start with. Yeah, I agree with you. But, and certainly I think there could be some minor changes that maybe even improves the airplane a little bit, but makes it a different airplane. And there's no necessity that it has to be called Q2 or Q200. Yeah, quackling would be a great name. Well, when Brian stood up, I said my arch enemy, and we're not really enemies, but As many of you may know, Brian has an engineering kind of a mind, and he does things very precision on his airplanes. And my approach to building airplanes is I want the thing to fly. I don't want it to look like a Oshkosh award winner, but I want to get the thing done and get it flying. So Brian will write a tip in the newsletter of how to use some sort of laser beam device to set up his wheels or his wing incidents or whatever, and I might do it with a piece of cardboard, so I always write a little editorial note after Brian's letter saying, come on, get a piece of cardboard and a hunk of plywood. However, the output, Brian's output from looking at some of his pictures is gorgeous. You know, we got a Dragonfly on the field just like that. We've got a meticulous guy that, you know, takes a lot of time to get his plane done just the way he wants it, and it's gorgeous. So, each to his own, but we have this little rivalry going on, and so I call him my arch enemy. Brian, are you doing anything, since you already stood up, are you doing anything with your airplane that is special, or you're looking forward to testing out and finding out that it's different than the other guys have? Can you talk about that a minute?
Tell you what, why don't you go on? Let me go out in the car and I'll get my notes.
Okay, cool. Well, we have an actual Quickie guy that likes his Quickie so much that he now has a Q200. Why don't you introduce yourself, you handsome dog, you?
I'm Howard Hardy. I do have a Q1, and I've managed to smash it up here as well as other places. Flying good. It's for sale. I've got probably 240 hours with a Rotax engine on it, and about 60 hours with a Onan engine on it. But all the Onan flying was done at sea level. I'm living in Denver now, so it's not. It's got a Rotax in it now. Flies good. I think it's more fun to fly than the Q200, but you can't take your hands off the control. I mean, it's a flying airplane. It does what you're thinking about.
That's supposed to float to the audience.
Okay, we're all supposed to learn how to do this.
All right. The Q200 is new, and I'm just pulling the time off.
And you got that from someone who was...
Yeah, it was partially built. It was a pre-built project. The guy had built it, had gone out and taxied it, and the story is that he did a high-speed ground loop, and put it in the thing. When I finally got to it and found it, it was about 6 years later, and had about 1.5 inches of dust on it. And I loaded it on the trailer and started home with it. It flew off of the trailer.
You did high-speed aerobatics on the trailer?
On the trailer. I was doing about 55. It was hard to get it stopped. And so when I did, it was upside down being drugged through a fence post on the... So it was a new canopy, and it sanded off the top half, but it just flipped over, drug sideways. So I've got a lot of work in it. It flies pretty good. I'm enjoying it.
What kind of cruise are you doing on that?
I don't know. It's my first cross country, and I flew with a Dragonfly, so we had to slow down a little bit.
I didn't hear that. Well, you know, I have to give these guys in the Denver, Colorado area a lot of credit because they've mashed some airplanes there and they've come back with them. Like Charlie Harris flipped his very early in his flight test regime and was going to get rid of it, and then finally decided to rebuild it. Now he's got a plane.
The fastest one on the planet, I think.
Yeah, he's my And the interesting thing about Charlie's plane, because he's running the Sun 60 and the Sun 100 race, I took some guys out at Sun and Fun, and I said, take a look at Charlie's wing here. And when you feel his wing, you can feel the hump where his carbon spar is. And yet, this is maybe the fastest Q200 on the planet. So, Brian? They don't have to be perfect, Brian. They fly like crazy. But you framed your Quickie out here. You know, you've had.
Yeah, I've had the Quickie out here twice. Took it home once on a trailer.
Yeah, I saw the departure from the runway.
I got videotape of it.
And you framed the silver one.
Yeah, I broke the tail off of the silver one. On the silver one, when I first started flying, I didn't read. I think it was newsletter number 19 on and my ground angle of attack was wrong, so I would lose directional control from 50 to 80. And at 80, I had directional control again. Usually got airborne about that time. I did a lot of ground loops in it. In fact, the fixed base operator says, Howard, quit that because you're scaring my students and my instructors. But I raised the tail 7 inches to get the right angle of attack. And I put 20 pounds of weight in the luggage compartment, and it made a different animal out of it.
You know, there's nothing more disappointing than trying a new airplane. You know, you either haven't flight tested yet or you just started flight testing. I had a Quickie loaded on, my Quickie loaded on a trailer, and it got framed with a telephone pole on the way to the airport. And just understand, because this is going to happen to some of you out here, you know, some of these things, and your first inclination is, well, dang it, you know, wrap this thing up, put it in the garbage can, and get rid of it, you know, because you're feeling so depressed. But if you just hang on to it, park it somewhere, and let that feeling pass by, I mean, you'll be back at it again. And the odds are you're going to be successful the next time, because you're going to watch it twice as hard. And I see some other faces in this audience here who prang their airplanes. And even in the newsletter, I was talking about Bob Noble. Bob Noble had a proven tri-Q and was getting ready to sell it to another pilot. And on the demonstration takeoff, they went inverted, wrecked the plane. Now, Bob is going to try to rebuild it. That's what I heard. And who just told me that yesterday?
I was going to ask you a question from all this experience. How does Big Brother react?
You know, I think a lot of times these pranks happen. We scrape them up off the runway, put them in a hangar, and Rick Brothers doesn't even know about it. Because I have well, that's a story I tell. I did a survey, and I'm wanting to do a survey again of all these airplanes and see what kind of hours we got on them. But years ago, I did a survey, and I had like 160 airplanes. And I did basic information about who owned it, what the N number was, and what its cruise speed was, empty weight, just a few things that I knew I could rely on. And the last column I decided would be a remarks column outlining any accidents or whatever which had happened in these airplanes. And a great many of them, there were some accidents. They get in fact, I was going to have a patch made up of a runway light, you know, give the guys who pranged one. But anyway, for dramatic effect, I decided that every time I would start that remarks column, if somebody had broken something, I would start that remarks column with broke. Broke tail spring, or a lot of tail springs broken in the early years. Broke tail, broke wheel pan, or whatever. And I had this thing all typed out, and the form was going to be printed up, and I was in bed one night, and just before I was going to shut out the light, I'm looking this thing over to see if there's any typos or whatever, and I feel this warm breath on my neck here. And it's my wife, and she's reading that last poem. Broke, 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 broke. What's all this mean here? Broke, broke, broke. You're not sending that out to anybody, are you? So, we've had a, hey, formation, breaking run. Hey, did anybody notice? Both of those planes are missing a canard. Anyway, so there are a lot of minor accidents that are happening in these planes, and I think that's probably happened a little bit less now, because now that we figured out what's break, and we're fixing them in such a way that they don't break. And one of them was that ground angle of attack. Art?
I took that same list that you made, and I compared it with the accident and incident reports that I got from the FAA,
And it was about, I think it was 36% of the accidents and incidents that you had been reported.
Oh, really?
That's all.
That's more than I would have guessed.
Yeah, it was, it's a fair number. But that was back, I did that back in '89.
So that's where the feds stay on this. The feds don't know about it. In fact, I had a friend that we were building our planes together, and he was building a KR, and he had at least 3 gear-up landings at various places because he was a 150 pilot, wasn't used to the fact that, well, this thing can go up and down. And this too. Anyway, but he forgot to put them down, and that never got reported, and he didn't have to repair damage each time. And that's when I started thinking, wait a minute, we know about a lot of accidents that don't ever appear on the FAA rolls. And in fact, I got to thinking, if the FAA really knew what's been going on with these home builds, we might not be able to build them anymore. Maybe they don't want to know. Well, while you have that mic in your hand, Art, why don't you talk about your experiences with your airplane?
Hi, I'm Art Jewett. I'm usually around these events. November 2 Alpha Mike I just shoved it out on the flight line, so it's out there now. It's got 525 hours on it. I'm a little bit embarrassed when I went back to my flight record so I don't have to replane the Loran to come. I realized that in 1992 I had 420 hours when I came, so I've only flown 100 hours in the last 2 years. I haven't had any particular unusual incidents in the last year since I was here last. I had one little minor problem. My lead wire from the main bus to the avionics bus got down to 3 little strands, and as a result my autopilot didn't function, and I had a hell of a chase before I finally found it. But the guys in Chattanooga were real nice about helping me with sending me replacement parts and pieces, and it wasn't their equipment at all. It was that wire that had come unglued, if you will. But I had a substantial voltage drop on my avionics bus, and I had a hard time finding it because it was buried behind everything.
You know what? You haven't had any problems lately, but I remember one problem that Bear is talking about, and that is the Quickie guys used to try to assemble in Missouri, Springfield. And before we got together with Spud here to have a joint get together, and that fuel...
There's a potentially very serious fuel problem with these airplanes. I've had it about 5 times, and funny lesson I talked about last night, and I don't think I've still got it fixed right. And, I'm going to try something different. Depending on your exact configuration of your feed lines and your breather lines, you can have the breather line filled full of fuel, and we're less than now speculating with his engineering background that when you turn the pump on after you let the tank absolutely top, you can actually put a vacuum on the header tank and prevent any fuel flow out of the header down to the engine. And he thinks that's what has caused my engine to either run very lean, which it did in Springfield that time, or actually stop.
It actually burped or something. You took off, and I think we were watching you, and all of a sudden it was whoop, and it was whoop.
Yeah, and it was a rather tense little moment.
I can imagine you thought it was pretty good, yeah.
Because we went about 50 feet in the air.
That ball hit under your seat, probably you had a good grip on that.
And the airline got waved off, you remember?
Oh, yeah.
And I got a choice landing on any runway I wanted to do, and the fire truck came out, and all kinds of nice things happened. But we got down all right, no problem, and the ultimate problem that time is that in all the crowd around while I was shooting it, I did not put the fuel cap back on. I closed the fuel door without the cap on. And that fuel door is in a low section, and it just sucked all the air out of it effectively, and was causing various mixture differences in the fuel flow. But the solution, Les has convinced me that filler tube with another vent and had a second vent. So if you're venting the main tank separately from the header tank so that you don't cavitate the header when you turn that pump on. Because that pump will fill a 3/8" line. I've got 3/8" lines going down to my engine, so be careful on that.
Why don't you pass that up here to Kimball here? Kimball's got some trick stuff going on his airplane. Kimball, give us introduce yourself and give us a little history of your airplane. How it was originally, what you got doing now.
Kimball McAndrew from Calgary in Canada, and I originally built it as a Q2 with the RevMaster engine, and I had no end of problems with that RevMaster. I don't know if anybody out here is still flying one, but I flew it 165 hours and did 3 valve jobs and put on a new set of heads in that time. And when I put on the new heads, then I had to put new seats in them so the seats would last. And I just thought I had it all worked out, and I was going on across country, and the crankcase broke on me. And I've seen quite a number of pictures of the way the crankcase breaks on those RevMasters. I guess what they did was they put the thrust bearing on the middle main bearing journal, and there's just not enough meat in there to take the kind of thrust that those engines put out. So I think most conversions put that thrust bearing on the rear case where there's a lot more metal. So that's one thing to really watch out for when you're flying RevMaster. So anyway, by the time I had that problem, luckily the engine didn't quit, it just started spraying oil out, and luckily the oil came out the top, so I knew it was happening. So I got it down okay, it didn't quit running. And I hauled it back to Calgary, and it was sort of like you were saying, Jim, I just was so tired of it by this point in time. I deregistered it, and I just had it put it in my backyard for lawn ornament. And then
I have one of those.
But finally, after about a year, I started to wonder whether I shouldn't do something about it. So I started looking around at various engines, and I thought, well, at O200, maybe convert it to a Q200, and I don't know, I heard a lot of people say that they felt the Lycoming was a better engine, so I started looking around for a used Lycoming engine, and finally came up with one, and then I could get the weight of it and everything, so I could start doing some weight and balance on it, and went through about a year of doing my calculations and rechecking them, and every time I rechecked them, I found another mistake I made. And my wife was asking me, well, are you sure you know what you're doing here? But finally I got after it, and actually the other problem I had with the Q200 was that GU canard too. When I put the vortex generators on, it was reasonable. Before that, you hit some rain and full power, minimum speed, and you're coming down at 1,500 feet a minute.
Oh, your airplane was doing that too. I know the Quickies were doing that because they didn't have a whole lot of power burned, but you actually experienced that in a Q2.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Vortex generators solve that problem?
They basically solved it. I'd lose about 10 knots in rain with the vortex generators, but I could still maintain altitude, and it was quite reasonable. And with the vortex generators, though, everybody was curious about what they were, and every time I went to go flying, there'd be a few missing. So I just had them glued on edge on the top of the wing there, and in fact, I was right there one day, and this cabbie comes over to my plane and just dropped somebody off at the airport, and he said, "Oh, that's a nice plane," and he stumbled just as the plane, and he took out about a foot up.
Well, there's a Q2 out here, and they put their protectors on last night before they pulled it into the hangar.
Yeah, I never thought of that. They were clever for that, but you need something like that. It was just terrible. Yeah, I always carried spares with me in a box. I always had to do that. And before I put them on, too, I had an experience. I think it was written up in the newsletter way back, where I took off on a runway where I just went through a pool of water, and it's got water on one side of the canard and not on the other. I had a hell of a time keeping the wings level there. Full air on to keep it level when I lifted it off. But it dried out pretty quick. So anyway, I got going on the LS canard because I really wanted to solve that. that problem too. I had all these various things that were bugging me about the plane, and I finally decided I was going to fix them all. So I used the Dragonfly layup schedule, basically, or layup style for the LS Canard. The other thing I wanted to do was I wanted to move the wheels in off the wingtips. I found that was a real handling problem in my case anyways, because there's so much leverage out there that even after 150 hours of flying, you're still, you know, about one landing out of 6, and it was always when you had another pilot with you, you just had a hell of a time. One time in Calgary at the International, I used up the whole runway with this pilot partner of mine, as partners with him on Grumman. And I used the whole width of that runway. I don't know what it is, it's about a mile wide. So I wanted to go with an inboard gear, and I bought the Dragonfly gear and did a C spar with carbon top and bottom on it, and what did I get? Holman, is that his name?
Yeah, Martin.
I used his book to figure out the calculations for it, and did my layup calculations, and laid it. After I got it built, I put about 5,000 pounds of sandbags on it to make sure that I was at least in the ballpark there. And I was testing it to about 5G, I guess. And so I put it all together, and I'm really pleased with it now. It just works great. There's no trim change in the rein. It flies along real good. I usually cruise about 150 knots. I don't have quite enough prop on it now. Even in Calgary, they're flying around 7,000 to 8,000 feet. I can run the engine about 2,850 RPM. So I usually cruise about 2,600 or 2,650, and that's about 150 to 155 knots.
Did you have any, or not did you have any, but how did you mount that engine? What kind of special considerations did you run into to get that engine on your airplane?
Actually, maybe it's dumb luck or whatever, I don't know, but I used my RevMaster engine mounts.
Really?
And, you know, when I figured out all the CUG and everything, I had to build a bigger magneto box, and but I couldn't push the engine out. I was hoping that I could get the engine moved out a little bit, but couldn't do it, so I just used the RevMaster mounts and just changed the spacing on them to fit, and the magneto box, and just bolted her up.
And you didn't set the engine back, set the firewall back or anything, did you?
No, the firewall's in the same place. I had to just move the magneto box is deeper now.
Yeah.
But there's still about an inch clearance from the header tank.
Did you have to add any tail weight?
No. In fact, the battery is exactly the same place, which is back in the tail. But, no, that was the idea going through all those calculations, was I wanted to come out with without having to add any extra weight or do any major screwing around. So what I ended up with was a canard that's a foot longer than the wing now. You don't really notice it by looking at it.
I can see it now, yeah.
It seems to work real good. I put those sparrow strainers on. That's another interesting thing, is the sparrow strainers are, well, because I had a longer canard and a longer elevator, I just tried to scale up the size of the sparrow strainers and use the standard design, and they weren't at the right angle. So you can see out there I've got a sort of a temporary way of adjusting them there, and I messed around with adjusting them quite a bit. But when you're doing that, you've got to be really careful they're both adjusted at the same angle, or else you just have one hell of a roll trim there when you take off. Break your arm to fly more than 5 or 10 minutes. That actually happened to me on my test flight. I was wanting to do a runway flight on here's the runway at Calgary International. It's just over 2 miles long. And they got real busy just when I wanted to go, so they signed me another runway, and it's about a mile long, so I figured, well, that's still enough. Wrong idea. And so I lifted off there and tried to touch down. I had all this hell of a roll trim, and I hadn't flown the plane for about 3 years, I guess. And bounced it off the runway, and I decided, nope, I'm going to try this again. And so I decided for a go-around there, and it was similar to what they were saying for you there. They cleared the airport for me. And so I came in going on, because I'll tell you, you're focused on just one thing, but I remember calling one guy that was on final and they were holding them up for me and asking where they were and where I was, and the controller, I remember him saying, well, he's on short final doing 140 knots. But I wasn't going to stall, I'll tell you. I knew I had lots of runway, so. But got it down okay, and in fact I did a real good landing because you get lots of runway, pressure isn't on, and just use power to let it down. But I've been really pleased with it since then, and it's great.
Well, and those sparrow screeners, have you reached the final adjustment point where you're happy with it?
Yeah, I do, but I carry an angle gauge with me in the plane all the time, and a screwdriver and a wrench. The way I've got them hooked there, just compressing on some plywood, and sometimes with humidity and whatever, they loosen off and they'll change a bit. You can feel it in the roll trim. I also have out of one of the newsletters is a roll trim that's just a turnbuckle fitting on one of the push rods to the elevator, and that's great. That really helps.
Well, there must be a little bit of science to these sparrow screeners, because there's a guy, Bob Malachek, I thought he was going to be up here, but he set his up to be adjustable, and he kept messing with his because he was getting, I think he was getting a bobble or something in his airplane once in a while, just out of nowhere. He'd get a little nose dip, and he finally got a position on those sparrow screeners that he likes. So it may not be that you can just slap them on there and go out and fly and be happy with them. You know, it may be a smart idea to make them adjustable so that you can tweak with them.
I think so, because I think each plane, each canard has just a little different flying characteristics and whatever, and just the characteristics of the plane. I think that's really...
It's not made in Cessna jigs.
Exactly.
Thing. Yeah, they're all individuals, and we're not all perfect. That's me.
Yeah. He moved his, after playing with angle on the end and moving him down was what made him happy.
Yeah. He moved them under the downwash to the top of the wing, or canard.
Oh yeah, I think I read about that.
What do you think yours are like? Do yours like that?
Mine are basically on the same angle, I think, as the original. Like the relativity to the canard is pretty well the same, and I just was playing with the angle on it, basically.
How about, talk about that gear a little bit. Did that just come out perfect right out of the box, or did you have to tweak with that at all?
Well, I had to play with it a little bit, and I'm still not quite satisfied with it, but I guess I am now in retrospect, but it didn't come out exactly the way I wanted it. But I think it's probably better. I did a lot of fiddling around trying to place the fuselage station that I have the axles at, so I didn't get too much weight on the tail spring because of all these tail spring braking problems. And I tried to design the fittings up inside the canard so it would come out at the right angle, and then the gear legs ended up a bit shorter to get the correct deck angle. So then I moved the fuselage station ahead, so I ground a bit off the nose of the spring and tried to bring it back a bit. And it's still a little ahead of where I thought I'd like it, but you know, I've got really good control now, directional control. So when I haven't broken the tail spring yet, I've got about 100 hours on it now.
Did you slam in any landings just to test the gear for fun?
Well, I don't know. One last night wasn't bad.
So they're holding on. Yeah, are they fiberglass?
Yep, and I didn't put any extra carbon fiber on them or anything. Talking to Spud and the Dragonfly guys, I guess there's been a lot of problems, but I haven't yet. I did, when I put the BID around them, I didn't try to do it all in one piece because I was concerned on that knee where you get a lot of folding of the cloth and whatever. So I basically have twice as much BID around that bend in the leg as the plans say, because I brought the bottom half up to the start of the top curve and top down.
So you got an overlap there.
There's an overlap there, and maybe that's what's saving me. I don't know.
How about the layup schedule on the spars? Did you use the same as Dragonfly, or did you change that?
No, that's all designed from Paulman's book. I can't remember. There's about 15 or 16 layers on the top, and I think about 12 on the bottom. Thereabouts. I've got the whole set of drawings and design notes, so if somebody wants to go through my my calculations and tell me where else I screwed up. I'd like to know.
Well, I'm especially interested in that because those carbon spars aren't available. We used to know, we had a guy who knew where they were being, who had the mandrels, but he doesn't have them anymore. He got rid of them, trashed them because he wasn't selling any. So if somebody breaks their canard, we're gonna, they're gonna have a fit trying to find those two spars.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're gonna have to start thinking about other ways to make that canard.
Right. Well, I designed it for 8G, and which I don't know if that's quite as strong as the tubular spar. I think it should be adequate as long as you get inboard gear. If you get outboard gear, it might be getting marginal.
Well, I mean, keep in touch, and if we find you die, we'll know that that was wrong.
Thank you.
Don't do that. That was wrong.
Right. Another thought that I've had, I guess you were saying you had an autopilot in yours. Is that a commercial autopilot?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been thinking of building one of these air guide autopilots for mine. And I was thinking a neat way of linking that to the controls might be through a little servo motor on the trim on these sparrow strainers. They're real sensitive, and you could move them both together for pitch and move them differentially for roll. So it's an idea I've been playing with in my mind, and once I get my house built, I might start putting into that a bit more.
Sheehan did that once, and I talked to him about it, and he said it didn't work.
Really? Well, I know when you manually just tweak them, or if they get out of sync just a little bit, that roll trim is wound way one way or the other to compensate. So I don't know, I might still pursue that. No. Right.
A question just popped into my mind, not for you, Kendall, but somebody was asking last night about gas seals. You Dragonfly guys are into sealing your gas on your elevators? It seems to me, I remember, I do type that newsletter up, and it seems to me, I remember years ago one of our guys doing it, and it didn't work with the dam.
That guy in Oklahoma, I can't call his name, but the guy in Oklahoma.
What are you Dragonflies attempting to get out of sealing your gas stuff? Anybody want to comment? What's it going to gain for you?
You don't get any,
I wouldn't do it then.
correct.
You what?
You don't get any flow separation over the seam there between the elevator and the.
And so what? What do I do?
The airflow decreases your stall speed.
It does?
I think Spud could probably speak on this a little better, but on the guys that have done it, some of them it's worked perfect, some of it's improved, and some of it hasn't done a damn thing. So it just depends on how well how differently it's playing.
Got the idea from where? Oh, from the sales plane.
What some of the guys had actually known up.
Yeah. And any of you guys play with that? Experiment with that idea?
Some of the guys in Dragonfly said
Okay. Well, Kimball also was mentioning his early experience with the RevMaster, and if I have a long line here, I see RevMaster pilots here. You guys want to talk about yours for a minute? Oh, right in the back there. We need 3 miles. And we got it. But this plane is actually out on the line, so we can look at it.
Charles Kuhlman and Harold Dirks. We're from Central Iowa. Got a pretty bad sore throat, and I'll talk while my voice holds out, and I'll turn it over to you, Harry. Took about 10 years building ours. It's the white one out there with no stripe on it. Finished it in '92. RevMaster, 64 horse. We've had a few engine problems. We've replaced the heads. They cracked on us, I believe it was last fall. So we bought some new ones from Steve. Is this too loud?
Not for me.
And detuned it. We put, what were they, 60,000 shims under it. Lowered it from 9.3 to 1 to 8.5 to 1.
And I noticed that I think in the last newsletter Spud had, he had a guy detuning the engine or suggesting that that's a good way to go to keep reliability.
Exactly right. That's what Steve said. It doesn't seem like we lost that much power. It's not really noticeable. We had to lose some, but it's not too bad. A few of the unique things about our airplane is we have adjustable seat backs in them. My wife did all the upholstery, and the seats work out real well. Harry and I are different heights, and so it works real well. We have the T-tail, of course. Our tail wheel is a bit different. We have a different angle to get our correct ground angle of attack, and also I cracked the tail spring on it, and we fooled around with trying to design and actually had a stainless steel tapered rod for tail spring. That had too much torsion in it, so Harry built this leaf spring, just one single leaf of the spring, and that works real well. We have dual controls, the belly board, landing lights on the belly board. We don't use those. We haven't flown at night yet. Forward hinging canopy. The canopy, what do you call them? Not latches. Braces are Harry's design and manufacture. I think they're unique. I've never seen any others like it.
Yeah, they're pretty neat. Everybody ought to take a look at that.
They're simple, cheap.
Not hard to make either.
Nope. Just all out of aluminum tubing and spring. And also, Harry designed a quick release on the canopy in case you would ever flip it over or needed to get the canopy off in a hurry. You'll see a little aluminum bar on the front of the console. Pull that, it pulls the cable that releases the front latches on the canopy, and you can easily get the canopy off. We have vortex generators. What have I left out, Harry? We had it loaded at gross and slightly beyond on the trip down here. We've rated it at gross at 1,100, and we only had like 8 gallons in the seat tank, and not too much baggage, maybe 11 pounds of other baggage. We were only doing about 125. It's the maximum. That's why we're going to leave today while the weather's cooler. Single, if there's only one person in it, we get about 135, 137. So far, the Redmasters work pretty well. We have a slight high oil temperature, 210, almost approaching the yellow. What else?
That's a warp prop.
I'm sorry?
The propeller you
Good point. Yeah, the warp drive 3-blade propeller is a bit different. The wooden one that came with the kit was okay. I cracked it, so we bought a 2-blade from warp drive, and that we had vibration problems with, and it kept cracking at the hubs. They have a lifetime guarantee on their propellers, though, and so he wanted to make us happy. We tried another set of 2-bladers, cracked the hubs again. It wasn't a danger problem. That composite propeller could be seriously cracked till the blades are almost loose. It won't separate due to centrifugal force. But so then he had us try this 3-blader, and it's working real well. It's ground adjustable.
So far I'm hearing that those guys at Warp Drive are real easy to deal with, and they want to put out a solid product. You feel that way too?
Absolutely, Jim. I do. They're in Mason City, Iowa, and they seem to be good people. A couple of things that I'd like to get some feedback on from people sometime is, has anybody done anything to reduce the noise? This is the first long cross-country. It was 3 hours coming down from Marshalltown. Man, there's a lot of noise. I'm not sure if it's just vibration off the firewall or if it's, there's no muffler, if it's exhaust noise or a combination of everything. And what are people doing with auto fuel? We're running auto fuel in ours. We're running premium, which they put octane boosters in, and like we were talking up at Oshkosh Art, those things may, from what I'm seeing, look like they do affect the epoxy. Of course, you stay away from gasohol. The alcohol will harm it, but is anybody else running auto fuel? So those are two of the things I'd like to get some input on. military.
Have you got any thoughts on gasoline? We were talking about this earlier. Auto fuel, what are your thoughts about auto fuel that you're aware of?
You want me to just review that right quick?
You betcha. Take the time.
I tried calling the guys at Hexcel, trying to find out about safety epoxy, and of course that's out of date. There's a lot newer epoxies now. Tried calling people at some of the oil companies, finding out what they knew about it. They wouldn't talk to you hardly at all. So basically the guy at Hexcel said I should do some testing of my own. I took some of the old cups that were left over from when we mixed epoxy and took the pure epoxy that had been cured for years, cut those into some small wedges and dropped them into a combination of, I wanted to verify the ethanol problem, and it sure enough will affect it. And then I wanted to find out about this MTBE, methyl butyl tertiary ethylene, or whatever it stands for. Amoco puts that in their ultimate. Unical puts it in their gasoline, the Union 76. It's a very common oxygenate to enhance the octane rating, but it's also a strong oxidizer. And from what I'm finding, I've had some samples in what I call high and low temperature tests. I took some baby food jars and stuck these different gasolines in the baby food jar. I set some in the window of my pickup so that it gets up to 160 degrees sometimes in the summer, and then some I just kept in the garage. And they've all gained weight. The ethanol, of course, was the worst. It's had a 16% increase in weight. We've got a very precise scale at work that measures to the 4th decimal place. And so there's definitely, plus the ethanol sample, the epoxy is real flexible. I also put in a little sample of fiberglass and epoxy. And while that hasn't gotten flexible, it gets sticky. And so you know it's attacking it. I also tried it with 100 low lead and with Sta-Bil, because I want to add Sta-Bil to our gas. I thought I would. There's been no effect from those two. The next thing I want to try is just regular unleaded. It's a little lower octane, but I want to see what it'll do. I would like to burn auto fuel for the price savings and the convenience, but we did have our header tank start leaking, start seeping down the sides of the fuselage. Started getting, this was after I first started putting auto fuel in it. Although we didn't probably put enough epoxy in the inside of the fuselage, so it's hard to tell what the effect is there. But what we did to solve that was we went in and routed out a groove all the way underneath the joint around our header tank, filled it with flocks, put a couple of layers of glass over it. That solved the problem so far. We did that early this spring.
You know what your answer is? Your answer is don't burn auto fuel in your tanks because the safety box just won't handle it. You're gonna eventually get degradation in there because you're seeing that right now. I mean, you can post cure that stuff up, and when it starts cross-linking, if you post cure it, it'll be more solid and more resistant. But if you want tanks that you can put auto fuel in, when you originally build the airplane, like Hurricane 47, the vinyl ester resin, when they're line your tanks with it, and then you can put that stuff in there. But just remember that any place where you have flocks, where you have used your safety epoxy, it will eventually start degrading. It's just not made to do that. And if you order from Hexcel or any of these companies like Shell or like DuPont, whoever you get your resins from, they have a resistance chart that will tell you what these things are resistant to. And in my own case, what I did was I ordered from DuPont or whoever makes Hexcel, the Hurricane series resin. I picked a resin system that had the greatest amount of resistance to that kind of thing. I went through all your newsletters and started noticing a trend. What I did,
a guy that reads the newsletter. Some guys never find that stuff.
I looked at some read. So what I did was I looked at Hurricane 470. 470 was actually made to hold hydrochloric or maybe even some stronger acids. And the stuff is resistant to benzene and a lot of the additives that you find in fuel products today. So once you do that to your tanks originally, you shouldn't have any problem.
Well, when you do that, I mean, you have a safe epoxy base.
Yeah.
Will that stuff bond fine to that base? I mean, you're going to line your tanks with it, so that's what I was questioning. Whether
you know, the normal practice in the composites industry is you take a surface that you want to bond to, and they actually create the same kind of something similar to what happens when we find sand dollars to give it mechanical bite. And that's exactly what you're doing. So once you have a cured surface, sand the surface, and then go ahead and coat it with this with the Duracane. As Duracane comes, either promoted or unpromoted. So it's best to get it promoted, and then you have to use it fast. But it works.
And that's just an exterior coating. I mean,
That's all you have to do.
You're not laying a fly of glass or anything.
I did in my case. I put, in fact, the header tank, I laid that whole thing since it was and the other thing about Duracane is it'll heat up blue foam. Okay, so as long as you're using with Clark foam or urethane, it's fine. But on the inside of my header tank, I made that entire surface out of Duracane. And on the inside of where the main tank is, I buffed the whole thing out and I laid 2-ounce model airplane cloth on the inside. And then I did a big buildup of Duracane in there. That works.
What about joints?
Joint
Blocks with Duracane on it, or what?
You can do that. I wasn't experienced enough to do it, so I just used the regular blocks, and then I used Duracane seams over that. Okay.
Brian, are you saying that even regular unleaded gas, the toluene or other things they put in it would eventually affect the epoxy?
That varies from state by state. So, and it varies from vendor to vendor. So,
and there's no way to know that.
There's no way to know it. You're taking your chances.
Well, while you're here near the mic, I got one other question, unless you want Harry to answer. It's a trick question. Hey, let's take that mic to Harry and get him to see what his voice sounds like. Here's a trick question.
Sounds kind of rattling.
My trick question is, years ago, there used to be a lot of these airplanes flying around with T-tails, and all of a sudden, the T-tails has disappeared. And I'm wondering why you guys still have your T-tail on there, and what effect it has on your... do you see a difference where you can say, yep, it's a good thing we have it, we're sure happy with it?
Yeah, I'm glad we've got the T-tail. We also have the aileron reflection. We've got both of them. Okay.
And that was common too.
Yes. We find that in rough air, the T-tail helps stabilize the thing a little bit so you don't have too much pitch change. Also, when you're coming into land or when you're taking off, it seems to help more than the reflexor in keeping that tail planted on the ground. And so it helps your squirtiness, if you want to call it.
Okay, do we have a Q200 pilot here who had a T-tail and doesn't have it anymore? Where's Fisher? Did you ever have one? You never had one? Okay. Because I know guys that specifically got them out of there because they realized it's not adding anything. In fact, some people are saying it's causing a drag. Okay, well, we don't have the other story. So. Okay, thank you. What else did I catch here? And that's that's something that's perplexing to me is this Revmaster engine, in that there are folks like you guys who essentially are happy with it. Okay. But you know, when we used to have our meetings up in Springfield, there's I think there were like 5 of them up in Springfield, and those guys, it's almost like they came off the planet Mars, you know? What Revmaster problem? What are you talking about?
Yet, I think I had more complaints about the Rev Masters from the general population of Q2 drivers, who wanted to get over to the Continentals as fast as they could. So, and I never could understand what the difference was, except it seems to be related to cooling. The guys that have got their Rev Masters baffled real well and are keeping them cool seem to be saying, what in the world? They don't seem to understand what the deal is. And this is important because we still have a lot of builders out there who have that Rev Master engine as part of their kit. And the thing that concerns me, my interest in doing what I'm doing with you guys, is to see those airplanes into the air. And if a guy is sitting out there with a mostly completed airframe who is suddenly saying, oh hell, now I got to come up with $5,000 or $6,000 for a new engine, I'm just going to sell this thing. Well, I hate that, because flying one of these things, a home-built airplane for the first time, you being the god and creator of the thing is just a real thrill. And to have guys give up at 80% down the road just bothers me, when they could finish it. So if there's any tips we can give the guys who own Rev Masters so that they don't give up, I want to promote that, because I want them to buy that airplane. Shoot, if you can get a couple hundred hours out of your Rev Master, that's probably 3 years of flying. By that time, you can save up enough money to switch to an engine. Another engine. And believe me, I've flown behind a known hand if you want to talk about engines. It don't work. All right, who else can we talk to? Hey, Fisher!
Run until 10.
Okay.
You got a late start.
Geez, I'd rather not run at all.
Yeah.
Paul, you want to talk about your airplane a little bit? Even if you don't want to, I want you to. Thank you.
I didn't get to hear you.
Got anything to say on that airplane that people shouldn't miss?
No, not really. Mine pretty well stock. Built the plan. Barry Weber told me several years ago to build it, fly it. Build it, plan, fly it. That's all I'm doing.
And then what we're going to do
That's all I'm doing.
I'll get that with you. And then this afternoon, you don't want to 3 o'clock.
Did you finish while I was having a little?
He did that.
I'm done. Your turn.
He did that to you.
Hey, Bill, can we get these ancillary conversations quieted down a little bit? Some of the guys are... All right, everybody else shut up.
There you go.
Get outside if you want to talk. We're having a meeting here. Did that work?
It sure did.
Oh, you rascals, you mangy dogs. I hope your coffee is sour. How many hours you got on your airplane now?
370 something.
And this has been an over-water airplane, hasn't it?
Yes.
How did that experience feel, flying this thing over the cruise boat?
It's just blue concrete. A year ago, after Fun, I flew over with all the easy guys to the Bahamas for a couple of days. That's a lot of fun. If you haven't done that, it's worth doing.
Except they had the tanker fuel for you.
Yes, they did. I like a lot of shit for that. But
all right, cool. What were we talking about? Somebody was talking about paint. You got a nice finish on your airplane. How did you get that? What kind of paint did you use?
I used Sherwin-Williams Ultra Base 2 or something. 7? Okay, fine. I found a guy that was going to paint for me, and I used whatever he recommended. He knows paint a lot more than I know paint. The thing he impressed upon me was that you need to be careful of not just paint, but primer and filler and all the way down to the bottom. If you want it all to hang together, you need to use one system, because the systems don't mix well chemically.
And that's something a lot of guys spend a lot of time worrying about. They get to the paint process, and then I can hear them even out here. Well, what'd you paint with? Well, painting. I'm trying to figure out what a good paint is.
And if you wait till the time it's ready to paint, you'll see later. You've already messed it up, probably.
And then we also were talking about auto paint versus aircraft paint.
Yeah, I just use regular auto paint. It seems to work well for me, but I haven't had anybody's doing it.
And somebody had the opinion that if a company has a line of auto paints and aero paint, that you ought to buy the auto paint because the aero paint, the difference in the aero paint is probably about $20 for the same can. Same can with a picture of an airplane on it. So that's something to look into, to see if there is a difference in their line and if there's a difference in the price.
Does anybody use System 3 yet? You can drink my...
You can drink my paint? Yeah.
Anybody done anything with that?
What flavor?
Water-based paint, yeah.
I'm trying it.
Are you trying?
I'm working with the primer so far, just on the bottom.
Yeah.
And I've been very happy with it. One, you don't have to seal everything off and use a spray gun. I'm putting it on the roller. And that stuff, when you put it onto the roller, and when it dries just as smooth as can be. And say 200, 320 grit, and it's a finished product. And you can I can start on one side of the canard and go the full length of it, come back and put the second coat on right behind it. All in about an hour and 20 minutes. And wait overnight, sand it down. And then, do the film, put on however many coats you need. But so far I've been very happy with it. We'll see what happens on peak tunes. If it all peels off or falls off, I'll let you know.
What is the cost on that paint?
I don't remember for sure. It's 58 or 60 bucks a gallon.
How many gallons do you use?
I've used one so far.
I wonder how that compares with regular, with other brands of paint.
That's a hustle day.
Compatible, yeah.
DuPont Imron's about 60 bucks.
But it washes up. You have this additive you put to it which hardens it. And you thin it with water. And it washes up easy. The rollers are cheap and quick. So we'll see how it goes.
I'll try it myself.
Well, while you have that mic in your hand, why don't you introduce yourself and your co-pilot there and tell me where you are on your project.
I'm Jerry Masal, my wife Nancy, who's a pilot as well. And I started on mine in January of '81. And to try Q, I'm going to try to go with the Redmaster and replace the heads right away. And rebuild it from scratch before I ever put it on. And I've got it on its wheel. It goes and all the controls work. What I'm doing now, I've got it laying on its back, finishing the bottom. And when I flip it over, I guess we'll put the engine and instruments in it. And hopefully I'll have to push around the yard.
Cool. Okay.
Well, on this auto paint, airplane paint, when you're painting something on epoxy, what's the difference besides $25? If it'll take on an automobile and bounce all over the road.
That's what we think. We don't think there's any difference.
DuPont says the only difference in the Imron finish coat painting fiberglass is that you use the aluminum primer, which is a gray colored primer. Now, if you have parts, steel parts, on a particular airplane you want to paint over, then they have a red primer that you put on it. It's, like Rust-Oleum or something of that nature. But either one of them, it has to do with the base that you put it on. Aluminum and fiberglass is for the gray, and steel is for the rust colored, and then either use Imron on top of that. Now, I've done for checks on PTG, they make a similar product that you don't have to, on their primer, you can add an additional additive that you don't have to sand to add additional layers of primer. I don't know what it is, but I think it leaves a semi-rough surface there so that you can add
Well, basically, you go by what the paint manufacturer recommends.
Yeah, but I have, on one of the brochures that I got from PPG, there's about 13 different centers that sell this stuff. I called every one of them, and you get a different tune from every one of them, Some are very cooperative. And how many thousand gallons would you like to have? Oh, crap, I like a pint and a half. And 3 times I've asked for a application brochure for the Imron from them. I even give them the number they refer to.
They never say that doesn't exist anymore. All I get is more order blanks. Goes for fine me. I find more cooperation with PPG, although I don't know anything about anybody ever having used that thing on an airplane. But they say it's identical and $20 cheaper again.
That's what I got on mine.
PPG? PPG. Yes, you happy with it?
Looks good.
Good.
No. You do?
Deltron. Yeah,
But for those of you who do want to paint your larynx, this drinkable paint here, the point was just made that the stuff is odorless. Jerry, is it tasteless too, do you think, or have you tried that yet?
I haven't gotten that far.
Jerry, are you planning on doing a finish coat with a tinky little roller too?
No, I'm gonna, just on the rudder, I'm gonna try putting on the roller and see what happens, but my anticipation is the last coat's all spray.
But you don't need any high-fi equipment.
No. And the thing that makes Ned very happy is there's no odor to it, and the fumes, there's no fumes related to it, so you can do it in the basement without ever getting in trouble.
All you just need is a clean place to do it.
Yep. And you clean it with 50/50 solution of water and rubbing alcohol.
Did you read anything in the brochure about you have to recoat it, it has to be coated within 24 hours?
No, in fact, you don't have to sand it if you put the second coat in within 7 days.
Okay, the local body shop that's using a water-based paint was telling me that they have to put some type of top coat on within 24 hours on the water-based primer.
Oh, the primer, definitely not in this brochure. But I was thinking there might have been something related to that on the finish coat, but I putting the sealer on it. But the primer, no, they just say don't have to even sand it if you put the second coat on within 7 days.
Well, while you're on the paint subject, I have a question. I'm trying to locate some of this multicolored paint that used to be called flex tone, which used to carry it and then they quit. And I need some now to do some touch-up work in the cockpit.
Is that the metallized thing?
Is it spackling?
Metallized paint.
It's a water-based, multicolored.
Is that like spackling?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a trunk paint.
It's more like a trunk paint, only it comes out quite smooth. It makes a beautiful finish on the interior of the cockpit over the glass. But I don't know where it comes from. I can't find it anywhere.
I've seen that in speed performance shop.
You can buy it now. Go to Walmart.
Ooh.
Hey, you better get around, you know, it looks like it's practically in your local gas station in the way everybody's talking.
Dillard don't have it.
Dillard, J.C. Penney?
Yeah, they don't have it.
Only Wick doesn't have it anymore.
The local map, I went through all their catalogs, and there was no,
I used to get mine from Aircraft Spruce.
they had.
You're saying they're not out of
They
it?
had these cans of trunk paint, but that comes out so rough, it's ridiculous.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But,
Yeah, what you're talking about is a very fine spectrum. Yeah, I have it on mine. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's good is it distracts your eye that if you've got raw fiberglass that you haven't filled, and you spray it with it.
it's a great cover.
Now, I know, Brian, you wouldn't go for something like that. You're gonna fill everything, huh? You wouldn't mind having a raw egg show? I'm tired. Hey, while this guy's talking, why don't you tell him about your project a little bit, because you're doing some interesting things with yours.
Stand up so I can see you.
Stand up, you want to
so you can see your face.
Unless you don't want to be seen now. It's okay. I mean, you're an impressive.
There's no IRS representatives here.
No.
My name's Dick Barber. I'm from Rogers, Arkansas, and I've been on my project, I guess, about going on the 5th year, starting in July. And I've got a 3-axis trim system that I designed based on the pitch trim system that came with the kit. That is, you put a couple of 100-pound springs on the elevator and wrap it around the pulley and crank the pitch wheel. But instead of using a friction device to lock it, I've seen some of them that they work real nice when you're in cruise, but if you want to go up or down on it, you usually override the friction and you got to reset it again. So I put spokes in my little pitch wheel. Just carved it in 5 spokes, and I just put a common plain vanilla door latch type dial that slides back and forth into it. So you get it, you can adjust it every 72 degrees, I think, it's about a fifth of a circle. And the same type of control I've used on the aileron trim and the yacht trim. I had to move the pitch trim from up in front of the control stick back to the canted seat back above the center armrest. The reason I had to do that is I connected my two elevator arms together with a couple of U-joints, and then I put a horn in the middle of it and ran a control rod from the control stick down to that. And it's got gooseneckings to go down in front of. I put a little ding in the tank, but it turned out I didn't put enough in it. And I wasn't going to ding it again, so I just went to a heavier gauge aluminum tubing and put a dog leg in it, and that seems to work. I stood on it. I'm a petite 205 pounds and didn't bend, so I guess it's okay. Then where the pitch trim was supposed to mount, I put on a control switch that I got from an amateur radio supply store in Milwaukee, I believe. And the purpose of that, I'm using the KX99 radio mounted on the instrument panel, and I read somewhere where it had nav included. The nav antenna should be mounted horizontally, the communications antenna should be mounted vertical. Well, you put the communications antenna in the tail. There's two nav antennas, one in the canard and one in the wing. And this control switch gives you two inputs and then a single output to the radio. So if you were chit-chatting on the comm, you'd be, of course, hooked up to the comm antenna. You want to get into the weather or into the nav mode, two things you have to do. You have to change the frequency by either poking in the actual frequency number or calling up a memory. Oh, and at the same time, while you got your little paw up there making that change, you switch over to the other antenna. The only caution I got from the amateur radio people told me is make sure you don't make that switch while you're keying the mic, or you'll cook something, you know. So I haven't tried it yet. That's where I'm going to mount this. Now the garden variety RF switch that I think Radio Shack has won't hack it. I don't know much about avionics, but I talked to the amateur radio people in Milwaukee at the store and told them what the problem was, and it's a $26 switch versus $3. And it's kind of a heavy switch. It's cast aluminum. It's kind of heavy, but well made. So that's going to go right at the front where the control stick. And what I'll do, I'll have the single output pointing forward, and coming aft is where the tube will go in. The comm antenna, the coax, will come up from the left canard, in front of the tank, up into the armrest, and then do 180 degrees into the left contact. And then the comm antenna will come up the back. It'll come through the right armrest, across the tank, into the center console, into the other input, and then of course the output one, the single one, goes through a hole in the instrument panel, up the back of the instrument panel, through a hole, and then down into the top of the radio. Sounds good. I hope it works, you know. And when are you going to fly that thing? Well, as soon as I get guzzle a little bit of this paint that's zero cells, I'll give it a shot. I'll have to be. I'm going into epoxy vitral, so it's apropos.
What color do you want your trachea to be?
My what?
Your trachea.
I'm kind of like candy apple red one. Wouldn't use that kind of language in front of the children. Embarrassed.
Hey, I see some unusual folks here, some quickie guys. Tell us a little history of your experience with Quickie.
Which one?
So start from 1912.
1912. I'm Bud Starnes. I'm from Evansville, Indiana. And I bought M1 Victor, which was the test bed that they used a lot. And I bought it from a local guy that bought it from
Somebody. That guy.
Yeah, Ray Anderson. And anyway, I had the plane had delamination on the canard, and the guy was afraid to fly it, so I went ahead and bought it from him, repaired the canard, got everything going, put the old end back together, got everything going, and
took it over and was doing a lot of static run, a lot of taxi testing, got everything I thought was fairly well on it. And on the first flight, the main bearing seized to the crank, and of course I was a little bit short of the runway, wasn't high enough, and did a couple of cartwheels about 200 yards from the end of the runway. Walked away from the plane, destroyed the plane up pretty bad, but it's, I am rebuilding it, and it's in the stage of being rebuilt right now. So.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted you to talk. A, so that everybody understands you can roll them up in a ball and still walk away. Because I remember a few years ago that some authority was saying these fiberglass planes are no planes to have an accident in because you can't get away from them. But that's not true. We've had enough of those things where people are walking away from them and pretty much unscathed in most cases.
To tell the rest of the story, I was staying in the traffic pattern close to the airport in order if something did happen, because it was the initial flight. The plane was doing fine, it was handling great. My brother was in a 152 running the chase plane around me, but then he got to look at the landscape around 2 and 3 miles from the airport. Pretty soon he was gone, and you get 2 miles from a quickie and you can't see the little booger, you know, it just disappears. So anyway, I'd been up probably 20-25 minutes, and basically everything was going really good, and then all of a sudden it started shaking a little bit, and then I got to looking at the instruments, couldn't, you know, the oil pressure and the temperature and everything was fine on it, there's no problems there. I was heading south, and I thought, well, and the wind was coming out of the south, so I thought, well, I'll head on down, take a crosswind, come back and turn base and come back anyway. As I had turned and was heading back east and started back towards the airport, the vibration got tremendously worse. Still, I was about 2 miles from the airport. The big problem I had was I was at 1,200 feet. And we've got a 400 feet elevation field, so I was only 800 AGL. I should have been up about 3,000. That'll never happen again, but not really thinking about it the way I should, not anticipating any real problems. I was trying to stay as close to the airport as I could, just in case something did happen. As I turned on the downwind and started back towards the airport, the vibration got so bad, it just, you know, the only thing I could think of was, you know, hey, I've got to get back to the field, period. And then all of a sudden the prop just goes chunk. So at that point I radioed in emergency, and my brother was nowhere to be found, and anyway I headed back towards the field. I was doing probably about 105 at the time, and so I immediately slowed it down, pulled it back to 85 where I get as much distance forward as I possibly could out of the plane. And of course, doing that, the plane just ballooned way up. Well, the guy at the airport told me that was the wrong thing to do. You should have kept it going where he was at. You could have made it. Well, I don't know. You know, they say 85 is the best glide angle, so I figured, well, 80, 85 would be the best speed to keep it at. I tried to keep it at that. Wouldn't have been a problem except as 100 yards south of the runway, there's a road that runs perpendicular, and it's got about a 10-foot ditch on one side and a 5-foot ditch on the other. So I was hoping to hit just the other side of the road, hit the grass, and just roll right on up, maybe wipe out the landing light, or, you know, even miss everything, who knows. But I actually planned on trying to get across the other side of the road, and as I got real close to the airport, I realized I was going to touch down just short of the road. Well, if I hit the ditch, that would have been the end of everything. You probably wouldn't have walked away. So I elected to turn the plane, and just as I did, of course, I was, you know, going at a pretty good, probably 80, 85 at the time. The left front wheel caught the ground, and that's what caused the cartwheel. As it turned out, it probably was about the best thing I could do, because all the energy mass was generated to the outside of the plane instead of to the inside. And although I was shaken up quite a bit and still have a little neck problem out of it, it really didn't really damage me. The worst injury I had was some scrapes on the side of my leg, and you could get that probably by brushing up against a tree or a telephone pole or anything like that. It did tear the canard completely loose from the fuselage, and the engine was hanging off the front of it.
and the plane was upside down.
Let me cut this exciting story short.
Okay.
Because the Dragonfly guys are overdue. But anyway, the
I
point.
crawled out through the front of the plane anyway.
How did you get out of the plane while it's
I
upside down?
crawled out to where the canard had tore loose. There was a hole in the side of the fuselage about so big, and that's where I crawled out. So.
Boy, we could go on about this too, because that is a problem. I was in a rollover accident and I couldn't get away. I mean, if that plane lit up, I was toast. So it's, I mean, having some way to punch your way out of that canopy is smart. But anyway, we've got to roll it up because the Dragonfly guys need to get in here. Brian Martinez has some little parts and pieces and some plans that he's worked on, and we're going to try to get a small group together out here by the airplanes and talk about this stuff. So we're not done. And nobody has any excuse for not taking notes now, because I got a whole bunch of free pens and pencils here. So grab one on your way out if you need one.
Okay, before you all go